So, still on the topic of just awesome womenness, Renee did this awesome rap, which I know that you co-wrote for the BET Hip Hop Awards cypher.
Wasn't she incredible?
It was so good.
Yeah, she's the best.
So she said, I came to represent the ladies of our history. We know the founding fathers, but the mothers are a mystery.
That's right.
So, you know, in your play, it's really interesting because Eliza chooses to erase herself from the narrative when she discovers Alexander's affair. But a lot of women just have been erased from history, where often, you know, you'll read quotes that's like anonymous. And normally that was a woman, or we've seen so many women have to write under pseudonyms, under male names. Even Jo Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, insisted, or
those great Cormoran Strike books, they're so good.
I know, so good, but, you know, said she wanted to be JK because there's so many kind of like irritating things that hold women back when they become a female writer or a women writer or whatever that even means. So, you know, I'm really interested. How do you think that women and men can reclaim women's history and the narratives and perspectives of women? And you did this in Hamilton. You essentially had to create these stories for women because there's just less.
Yeah, there's not a definitive Pulitzer-winning Schuyler sisters biography.
No.
There isn't. We had to go. I had to go and do the research, and I relied on Ron a lot. And you know, to me, one of the most moving things about Hamilton's story is that it is cradled by his wife's story. Yeah. She's the one who brings it to us.
Yes.
And the last chapter of Ron's book is about her incredible life and how much she accomplished. She established the first private orphanage, which still exists in the form of the Graham Windham organization, which helps foster kids into adulthood, and ran it for 27 years. And if you had put that in a screenplay, people would be like, it's too on the nose. You can't have the widow of the orphan establish an orphanage. It's crazy. Except it really happened, and it's heartbreaking and beautiful. The other thing that's really tragic is she really, you know, she had 7 kids besides Philip, who passed away. Wow. And she really tried to get one of them to write her husband's life story, and she passed away before it happened. One of her sons eventually did complete it, but I also feel for the kids. He left behind so much writing. It's like, how do you begin to make sense of it? But, you know, that was her thing, was please tell my husband's story. She was so selfless in that way that women are so often asked to be and so often assume, as opposed to my story being told, as opposed to the woman's story being told. But I found her story incredibly moving. That's why we end with her.
Yeah, which is great. And it's so true. I think there's this perception that women are inherently, biologically more selfless and giving, and we just do that because we're women and that's how we are, which is such a shame because A, we don't get the credit that we deserve as human beings for being so courageous and doing that.
Absolutely.
And B, it just like, it removes the decision, it removes the agency out of it. It takes the choice.
Yeah, I feel really lucky. I grew up in a house with really strong women. My mom's a psychologist. She was a teacher. She was getting her master's when I was born, and then she's a psychologist. And she was, you know, she had a private practice in our house. So it was like, mom's working, we have to sneak around the patients and like go home. And my wife is the same way. My wife was a scientist when we started dating, got bored of being a scientist, and then went to law school while Heights was happening.
So she's a lawyer. Then.
Yeah, she's the brains of the outfit. Actually, yeah, I'm slumming it.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
So that's, I mean, I say that to say that like that thing of women are encouraging, or like, that was never my experience as a kid. It was just, you know, they were just getting shit done.
just getting so much shit done.
Yeah, that was just the thing.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love that you're married to like a scientist. That's super cool.
I told her to go right to med school from law school. Just like get the trifecta.
Just why not?
Yeah, just be the scientist, lawyer, doctor.
Oh, wow.
She was like, the last one takes too long.
Yeah, it's so true. That one takes forever. Okay, so speaking of awesome women, which female storytellers really have inspired you?
Oh, so many. You know, even in just the musical theater genre alone, there are so many incredible examples. I think of my friend Janine Tesori, who's the composer of Fun Home, which is an unbelievable show. If you haven't seen that, go see that.
Yes.
Go see that.
It was part of our He for She Arts Week. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, and it's really, and in addition to just being an incredible, like, that's a story that you would think. People always go, oh, a musical about a founding father. Oh, a musical about a lesbian cartoonist. Like, no, it's actually the perfect form for it. And she's she and her co-writer Lisa really unlocked that. So she's a huge. She's one of my heroes. I think of Lizzie Swados, who passed away, who is the composer, who, by the way, was writing hip-hop in 1978 for Broadway with a musical called Runaways, which she wrote all the music, lyrics, books, and directed. And so she's one of my big heroes in the theater scene. And then, I think of, I'm thinking of all, like, the young authors growing, like, I'm thinking of Beverly Cleary, and I'm thinking of Madeline L'Engle, and I'm thinking of, Judy Blume, and I'm thinking of all these incredible, and J.K., of course, the women who raised my brain.
Yes!
Because those were my books. Those were just my books growing up.
That's awesome. Speaking of books and, things that changed your brain, it's impossible for me to look over the fact that Hamilton focuses so much on the importance of education, teaching yourself, the power of education, the power of writing. Was there something that really drew you to Hamilton?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much a love letter to writers and being able to really change your life with writing. That's what Hamilton did. One of the first letters we have is a letter to his friend Ned Stevens. He's 14 years old, and he's talking about how miserable he is. He's working for a trading company. He's basically running a trading company because the owners are on ships. They're sailing around, and he says, I may be said to be building castles in the air, but we have seen such schemes successful when the projector is constant. I shall conclude.
For me, this was a huge problem watching your play. It's just that, words just, get me. It's like... Yeah,
we have seen such schemes successful when the projector is constant. Knock me out. And then he says... And
hang on a minute, whoa, rewind. How old is he when he wrote
14 years old.
No, this isn't fair.
14 years old.
14?
Yeah, and then he
So he's like a prodigy. Like a genius.
Yeah.
He's like a prodigy.
And literally wrote his way out. And he concludes that letter by saying, I shall conclude by saying that I wish there was a war. Because he knew he didn't have money and he didn't have family. He knew the only way for him to rise in society was to gain military glory.
Was for things to get mixed up.
Yeah, things to get mixed up and for him to be able to, but also the sort of acclaim that comes with winning a military victory. He said, I'll either die virtuously on the battlefield, and I think he had a lot of teen martyrdom fantasies about that.
Right.
But if that doesn't happen, I'll have had a command and I can rise up. And the whole time he's working for Washington, he's like, I don't want to be your secretary. I want to be fighting. Like he's the only one on best job at the war, like not fighting, writing, doing the thing he's best at. And he's like, please let me fight. Please let me fight. Please let me fight. Please let me fight.
So interesting. And do you think that's because there's this idea around as a man, that's just the ultimate glory, even though he clearly has the most amazing brain of anyone ever. Yeah. Ultimately being a fighter is
I think he was accustomed to that, but I think he really understood. I think it was his survival instinct was super crazy good, and he was just like, if I leave here just having been a secretary, that doesn't get me anything. No. I don't have anything.
And do you think that's also the idea of sacrifice, of what he was of the idea of sacrifice, of what he was willing to do for his country, and then he wanted to show how much he was willing to die for his beliefs, to die for this idea.
Absolutely. And you see that borne out again and again. You see him take on unpopular opinions. You see him take on other popular, it's all about being the crusader. He's a crusader.
Yes.
Whether it's with himself during the war or with his ideas when he's defending the Constitution, whether he's fighting with Jefferson over what the government should do. Yeah. I'm right.
Yeah.
And one of the first letters he has a letter to John Laurens where he says, he's talking about, he says, I need you to find me a wife. And it's kind of a crazy letter. He goes, I need you to find me a wife. She should be pretty, but not too pretty. It's very like bro. It's a very bro letter.
Bro-y letter.
Yeah. He goes, she needs to be pretty, not too pretty that I have to like worry about it. Basically, I'm paraphrasing. And then he says, and as to her political opinions, doesn't matter what they are, I will convince her to mine.
This is Hamilton who says this?
This is Hamilton who says
I'm liking
this.
him less now.
Yes, I'm sorry. But that's a real letter. Yeah, but that's also speaks to his arrogance.
I was so seduced.
You're seduced by schemes.
Moments ago. Yeah.
Your fave is problematic.
So well, and now
they're all problematic.
I know, people are problematic.
Yeah.
That's the difficulty.
It's true.
So, okay, so basically because he was just so focused on his political aspirations, he kind of just needed a wife who he could just like...
Well, he also said, I need her to have money because I don't have any. That was another thing he said in the letter.
Oh my god. Well, actually, I mean, I guess in a way it's kind of a gender reversal in the sense that we always think it's, you know, a woman at that period of time who would have been looking to marry a wealthy man.
That's true.
Whereas this is kind of the inverse of that.
Yes. Yeah, and he writes her actually really hard. There's one of the last letters before they get married is this very, I might win you back with this one.
Oh, really?
He basically says, there's a lyric in the show, will you relish being a poor man's wife? That's from this letter. He says, do you soberly relish the pleasure of being a poor man's wife? And he basically says, if you marry me, like, it might, like, you might be really broke. You come from money, and he says, like, don't have any illusions of, like, being in a field with garlands in your hair. Like, that's not what being broke is like. No. Being broke sucks.
It's horrible.
And if you're prepared to live that life, then we can get married because I think I'm going to do great. And then you'll just be happily surprised if we end up having money. But he really preps her. He's like,
well, he doesn't try and con her.
He doesn't try to con her. He really like, it's a very, you know, there's the arrogant letter to Lawrence, which is like, get me a wife. And then there's this letter, which is like, don't marry me because if you don't think you can be happy poor. Yeah. You know, so it's that bedrock of arrogance and insecurity that I think makes him so relatable. He's, in 1 minute, he's like, I'll convince her. And 1 minute, he's like,
oh my God, am I
like me for real though?
Yeah, do you really like me for real? Yeah, no, I think Hamilton's most compelling moments for me are always these moments when he makes decisions to courageously be authentic and truthful, even though it costs him. Yes. And even though that letter could have cost him Eliza, potentially. Right. She could have been like, oh, I thought you were poor, but not that poor. Actually, maybe I'm not so into this anymore.